say we make it to age 60, starting 20 years earlier than most people, that's very significant exponential growth. So I don't see it as something to limit myself. I kind of see it as an advantage because people are willing to share with you just because like they see themselves in you and they wish that. So it's kind of cool actually going to these things where you're surrounded by people in their 40s and 50s and 60s and you're 20 years old and they're like, well, who's this kid? He must be doing something cool.
Hello and welcome to the Art of Connecting podcast. We have a very special guest on today. We have famed Tim Stone over here. What's going on, Tim?
What's up? How you doing? Famed. That's an interesting word.
You are famed. How many followers do you have on Instagram now?
A little under 30,000, but we can kind of get into how that happened.
Famed. Yeah. So famed Tim Stone over here. So me and Tim had class together in 2020, I think
2020.
Yeah, something like that. We saw each other on the discussion posts, and I think at that point I was kind of starting to get into LinkedIn, and I was like, this guy's talking about real estate. I like real estate, and we connected with each other or something like that. And come 2022, he reached out to me on LinkedIn, or his assistant did.
My team, my marketing team.
His marketing team reached out to me on LinkedIn, and we started a great discussion. And now me and Tim I'm going to interview Tim, and then hopefully maybe we'll work together in the future because of networking. So Tim, tell me a little bit about what you do, like what your business is, and a little bit about your life maybe.
Yeah, thank you. I do a lot of different things. Most of it's kind of focused around real estate investing. So I invest in multifamily real estate properties. Majority of them are here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and then my partner in that real estate company, JD Frost, owns a CPA firm here in Chattanooga. So kind of our whole thing with that is tax strategy for entrepreneurs. We want to save you as much money as possible to put into your business, to put in investments, whatever you need that money for. And then we also have the opportunity, if you want to earn a pretty good return in real estate because we're also doing real estate deals. So it kind of meshes together in a certain way. But I'm a manager on the business development side at the CPA firm, and then I'm an owner and asset manager at the real estate company.
Awesome. So how'd you get into that? Tim's about the same age as me. We're pretty close in age. Mm-hmm. And yep. Tim dropped out of college. I wish I would have.
Yeah.
Hopefully my professors aren't listening to this.
Not too late.
So how did you end up in that realm, in that world?
Somewhere towards the end of high school, I was just really getting into entrepreneurship. I started flipping sneakers kind of by accident is really where my story goes back to, just my entrepreneurial journey. It was my 17th birthday. I went to the mall and bought myself 3 pairs of shoes because they were really on sale, over 50% off. Then I realized, hey, I could probably sell these for more than I paid. So I put them on Facebook Marketplace that night. And the next day I sold them and I made $50 profit on each shoe. But it was how I could fuel my sneaker addiction in high school. And then, let me think, around that time, my dad got into Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Mm-hmm. Someone gave him that book, he read it, and was like, well, I need more assets instead of liabilities. So he bought an Airbnb, which our family wasn't really making much money at the time, but he bought that Airbnb and it pretty much made as much money as his other business did in the first year. So it doubled his income.
From one house?
From one house.
Wow.
Yeah. So seeing that at the high school age where I was a little more observant and also kind of interested in it, I realized real estate's something I want to do. So fast forward to college, moved to Chattanooga, going to UTC, and I'm just like, I want to get into real estate somehow. So I asked my advisor, who do I need to know in Chattanooga if I want to do real estate? And she gave me a couple names, and one of them, funny enough, was JD Frost. And she said, yeah, he's coming to speak to you guys, your scholarship program in a couple weeks. You can meet him. So met him, built a relationship, and it was over a year later before we actually started working together, but it was just because I put myself out there so he knew who I was. And then
wow, I haven't heard any of this before, so this is really fun for me too. This is a perfect example of why I started this podcast. For people to hear that story. You knew the small, a little bit about something. And instead of, trying to go and dive in and research all about it, and I'm sure you did a little bit of that, but you just started asking the people that who should I be talking to about this? And that led to, it took a while, it took a year, but it led to the possibilities that you have now. So I think that's super cool. And perfect example of using the art of connecting to build up your network and all that kind of stuff. So that's awesome.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just him. He wasn't the only connection and the only, opportunity I was working towards. I was really educating myself on real estate, listening to a lot of podcasts, reading books. And the big thing for me was going to real estate networking events because I was meeting people who are actually doing it.
Absolutely.
You can read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I think it was written in the 80s. So at this point, 40 years ago, Robert Kiyosaki did some real estate deals and made money. Cool. But I'm talking to people who made some money on a real estate deal 2 miles from here like a week ago.
Right.
So that was just different perspective. So talking to those people, like, what are they doing? How are they doing it right here in my city? Like, these are people I know. I have their phone number. I go to lunch with them. I see them at networking events. So just being surrounded by people that are actually doing it was important for me on the education side and the support and the confidence to take a step because I have this network now that can support me if I have a question.
Right.
So that was really huge for me.
Cool.
Getting involved.
Would you say you're more of an introvert or an extrovert?
Naturally an introvert, but I've kind of forced myself to be more of an extrovert just because that's important.
Yeah.
Getting in front of people and talking to people is how you build a business, make money, do whatever you want to do or what your purpose is. Like, other people have the key to everything you want.
So what are some things that you do or did when you're first starting out with networking and go into these RIA meetups? How'd you force yourself to just go and do it?
Just showing up is the big thing. You just got to go. There's going to be a lot of extroverts there who are going to talk to you whether you like it or not. But you just have to know why you're doing it. I'm going to meet people because people are going to help me reach my goals. And the fastest way to reach really big goals is to help other people reach their goals. And the fastest way to really go far is helping a lot of other people. So you have to be connected with other people. I mean, I said people like a billion times right there, but that's what it's all about.
Down to, yeah.
Yeah, it's all about people.
It's all about people.
So, I mean, for me to make it a little easier, I was going with people I knew. They started a real estate club my freshman year at UTC. So I went to that, got to meet some of the people who run it, built relationships with them, got involved in I don't know what it's called, just kind of running the club, one of the directors of the club there. So with that, we were doing a lot of outreach, and being associated with that, with the real estate club, made it easier. Why is this 18-year-old kid coming to a real estate event? So it was a lot of different things that kind of helped, but it wasn't super hard. And then it's now you know people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you have people you can call.
So next time you go, there's 2 or 3 people it's a little bit easier. They introduce you to people they know, and eventually at this point, I go to that same event, and there's maybe 2 people I don't know because it's their first time there.
Right.
So,
and then you have that leverage too of you almost have your own reputation when you've built that up. It takes time, but now when you go to that event, they're going to say, "Hey, you need to talk to Tim because he does this." And then it becomes a business driver for you rather than once you've done it for a little bit, it doesn't have to be that long. It could be a year. Then, Tim's really good at that. You need to go talk to him when a new person comes. So,
and even at this point, it's only been 3 years,
right?
3.5 years.
It's insane. So me and Tim talk about college almost every time that we've met up.
Yeah.
I wanted to drop out of college for a long time, but I didn't.
Yeah. You still want to. You're just too close.
I still want to, but I literally have 2 months left. And Dr. Burke, if you're listening to this, I'm not going to drop out. But I was so tempted so many times, and Tim did. But it sounds like that UTC played a factor in your growth and the connections that you made. So how did that college experience grow you and your network? And also what kind of mindset did it teach you going into where you are now?
I always tell people that going to college was the greatest decision, and then dropping out was the second greatest, because it served its purpose for me. It got me to figure out what I wanted to do and how I could do it. And then at a certain point, I was about 2 years in, I realized that graduating, getting the degree, and continuing to go to class was not going to get me where I was going. But the first 2 years helped me figure out where I was going. So it definitely was great. I met a lot of great people, and they pointed me in the right direction, connected me with the right people. So it was worth it for what I used it for. But then it got to the point where we had the real estate business. We had already bought several $1 million worth of real estate, and I was managing all of it, and I was going to these conferences, and I was paying for myself to fly down to these real estate events in Miami and investing in my education elsewhere, and then building connections that like I could see actually translating to income and, building my wealth and building my business. So it just at a certain point, and especially during the summer when I had no classes and had no homework,
right,
it didn't make sense to keep going to school.
You start to realize how much income you can generate when you're not doing the homework. And I hit that last semester. When I started my business, it was like, as soon as school started back, my income went down because it's like I'm having to focus my attention on something else.
Yeah, I at that point, like, I could not imagine doing homework and sitting in lectures and like in class. It just was not going to happen. It made my stomach hurt thinking about having to do homework and stay up late.
When you're literally talking to millionaires all day long, it's like it is an inspiration form for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people who are going to be listening to this. You don't have to be 30, 35, 50 years old to be able to go do this stuff. You just have to talk to enough people. I think that's the coolest part about what both of us do is we just talk to people all day. And the money kind of just trails behind you when you talk to enough people. Yeah,
if you have a way to solve problems or provide value, and then you just talk to enough people, it's funny how you start doing business and making money.
And then it's also when you're surrounding yourself with the people who are in a good mindset, and you're surrounding yourself with the people who are doing the stuff that you want to do, how quickly you start doing that stuff instead of just wishing that you did.
Yeah, so your environment's pretty important to your mindset, but the mindset is like just really important to success in general. You have to realize that there's an abundance of everything out there, and you just have to realize what it takes to get it and do it. Get to work, no matter how long it's going to take.
Yeah. So you talked about the conferences. You were going to these conferences at what? How old were you when you were going to these conferences?
I think I started going to them when I was 19. I did a lot more of them when I was 20 after I dropped out.
So at 19 years old, tell me about what you would do, how you would kind of behave, and what your mission was going into these different conferences, and maybe what the purpose of them were, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, at first it was really about education, but what popped into my head, the memory when you were talking about it, is I wasn't old enough to book a hotel room. So I had to argue with them at the front desk every time I was checking in, and it always worked. Like sometimes they really didn't want me to, and I'd have to. It's pretty cheesy, but I'd have to literally like show them my American Express Platinum card for them to let me stay. As I flew in, it's like 10 p.m. and it's like the only hotel. I prepaid for it, so that's just a funny story. But I was going to the conferences really for the education. I take a lot of notes, and it's like I'd find myself reading books, and I would never read books for school. Anything I could do to get a report done without actually reading the book is what I was doing. So then I found myself reading a book by choice and enjoying it and soaking up the knowledge. That's how I knew I was kind of on the right path, because education is super important.
Absolutely.
You always need to be educating yourself, but how you're educating is a little different these days. So the conferences are really helpful just because it's very engaging, and it's especially when it's someone that has good information. But then you do have the networking aspect. When the speaker's off the stage, you go to lunch, the event's over, everyone's just kind of networking. You're all, for the most part, business owners or people that want to be business owners, people who have similar mindsets. So you're just walking around to people that want you to talk to them, and you can go up to anybody and say, "Hey, I'm Tim. What do you do?"
Yeah.
And start a conversation, get their phone number. It's not weird to ask for someone's phone number at an event like that. And that's an easy way to build a network, is because everybody in the room, and it can be thousands of people, they're all willing to talk to you.
I think that's super powerful. Even if you want to be like a, professional crocheter, or you want to be like whatever your profession is, because this podcast is at a general audience. It's not like a real estate podcast or a business podcast. And going to those, it costs $400-$500 maybe, plus your travel, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But you think about the money that you spend on things that aren't going to get you to where you want to be. And we've talked about investing in yourself several times on this podcast with other guests. I think that conferences are one of the best ways to invest in yourself, at least from, I'm going to one this weekend thanks to Tim. Yeah. But in listening to all the people that I have, just getting around those like-minded people is going to be your best asset.
Yeah, I agree. And that's probably the number one way I do invest in myself, is going to conferences and also sometimes getting involved in groups that are affiliated with the conference, just because it's like that similar mindset. Everyone in the group has a similar mindset. They're all, reaching for growth. They want to network. They want to help each other because they understand that helping other people is how you reach your personal goals. So it's just good to be involved in things like that. And it's been a really easy way to accelerate the learning curve. Like there's a book called Lessons I Learned the Hard Way by Brad Lee, and it's just, he lived a hard life and built a several $100 million company. So he put all the things he learned the hard way in the book, and now you get to learn them without experiencing them. Not saying like nothing hard is ever going to happen and like I'll never make any mistakes, I'll never have any failures, but the material is out there for you to learn from other people's failures, so you might as well do it so you don't make those mistakes.
You're preparing yourself by reading other people's stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also by talking to people about their stories.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people that I hang around are not me and Tim's age. Most of the people that I meet and see are, 35 plus. Most of them are a lot older than that. And every meeting I walk into, the majority, like 98% of people don't look like me. They're not my age. They're an age above me. And sometimes it can be hard to walk into that environment. How do you kind of just like justify yourself being in a room with all these people and people who are making millions, and at least in my position, making millions and you're not, how do you go about talking to those people?
The cool thing is that they're more willing to help you because you're like 20 years old, 21 years old, 22 years old, and everybody I meet wishes they were in my position. I mean, even as young as 26 years old, I've got people telling me like, dude, you are so young. I wish I started when you started. And I tried to, not take that for granted, that I have so much more time than most people.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, not to like, life could end at any point, but starting this early, say we make it to age 60, starting 20 years earlier than most people, that's very significant exponential growth. So I don't see it as something to limit myself. I kind of see it as an advantage because people are willing to share with you just because like they see themselves in you and they wish that. So it's kind of cool actually going to these things where you're surrounded by people in their 40s and 50s and 60s and you're 20 years old and they're like, well, who's this kid? He must be doing something cool. And even if you've got really nothing going on yet, you're just trying to learn, like that's the best.
Everyone wants to talk to you at that point because you stick out. And your bite there, I think that's going to be our front clip there. I always talk about the front clip in all of them. I think that anyone who's listening to this who's younger, like just remember that the best thing that you can do in a meeting is stand out. It's uncomfortable a lot of times. If you're in a room of people who are 50 years old and, you're there, even if you don't have it, but you tell people like, hey, I want this to happen. And they'll be like, oh, I know a guy, and they'll make it happen for you because you're in the room with them. Yeah.
And they love your mindset. That's the important part because a lot of people don't have that mindset because what most people our age, Hayden, are doing is
smoking weed.
Yeah. Smoking weed, drinking, going to parties and like not really doing anything with their career, barely doing their homework, like whatever. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And that's just kind of expected. So then when there's this young man who's dressed sharp, he's at this conference, he's talking to people, he's looking me in the eye, he's shaking my hand, asking good questions. Like that's someone I want to pour into who's making an effort to better himself. I have information he doesn't have. I'm going to help him out. I'm going to put him on with that information.
And it's not that hard.
Right.
It really isn't. And a lot of people that I talk to are like, man, at your age, how are you doing this? And it's like, you just
show up.
I just show up. And when you start showing up, you really start molding yourself into the people you're around too. And, there's this saying, I don't know who coined it, probably somebody really smart. You're the average of the 5 people that you spend time with.
Mm-hmm.
If you look around and the 5 people you spend the most time with are hitting the bong all day long and getting drunk every night, you're probably going to be hitting the bong all day long and getting drunk every night,
Yeah. Just because that environment. So I definitely agree with that. And it's just, you can't be average.
Mm.
You have to hold yourself to a higher standard and do the things that is the complete opposite of average, because average kind of sucks.
And it's scary to do that. Like, I'm in that right now. I have the savings. I've saved up, some money, and I'm spending a lot of money building my business, building this podcast, investing in myself. And it's scary when you think about, like, especially when you aren't there, you aren't making the income, you haven't seen the fruit. It's kind of terrifying to be like, what if I spend this $140 a month on my membership at a social club and I'm run out of money?
Yeah.
Well,
you know what happens if you do this for 5 years and it fails? You're 27 years old. You have way more experience than any of your friends, and you probably, even if you lose everything, you probably still have more money than they do.
Absolutely. And I've already seen it. It comes like you're having a conversation with somebody when you're in the right environment, and then someone else will butt into the conversation and be like, oh, hey, I do this. I need what you have. And that's how it happens.
Yeah. So especially our age, just like put yourself in that situation.
Yeah.
Because you have that time. Literally, like 10 years from now, you'll still be young. You'll be 32. Like a scary percentage of people in the world don't have it together at 32 yet, but you'll have 10 years of experience, 10 years of networking, and you can make something happen at that point.
So let's go to talking about your social media presence, because I feel like that also is an aspect of connecting to people. What are some things that you do to grow your social media presence, and how does that translate to building your network?
Yeah, one of the big things is being consistent with content, just because you've probably heard it said that now attention is the new oil. People, years ago, people got rich off of oil, but now it's attention. Like, you have to have people watching what you're doing. So putting out consistent content is one thing that's really just important in social media, just so people know who you are and how you think and start to get to know you. So then when it's time to do business together, they know, like, and trust you. The 3 requirements for someone to actually give you money: they need to know who you are, they need to like you, and they need to trust you. So that's an easy way to do it at scale, because you can, in theory, get in front of anybody who has access to the internet. So one thing I was pretty bad about is, like, doing everything that I do, being really, really busy. I wasn't producing content. I started a podcast when I was in college, but then I was the editor and producer of the podcast. I was doing everything, posting it, making clips, and I just can't do that anymore. So recently I hired a full-time editor to do that for me. And just because I see the value of doing it, now I'm willing to put money into it. Back to the followers, like we kind of talked about at the beginning, I'm trying to think of an example, like Kim Kardashian's giving away a Tesla and a bunch of Louis Vuitton bags and 10 iPhones. And all you have to do is follow these 50 accounts. We can pay to be one of those. So I have a couple thousand, several thousand real followers, but it's kind of just, I didn't like it at first, and I thought about not doing it for a very long time, but it does help because I do a lot of outreach. So now I have a team that logs into my page. They message people to connect with them, just to start conversations. And as shallow as it sounds, people respond more when you have more followers. You get a much higher response rate on just outbound connections.
And that's reality, know, and that's also an investment.
It is. It costs a lot of money.
Yeah, it's expensive to do that kind of stuff, but you gotta ask yourself, what level do I want to be at? Yeah.
So, and there's a return on investment. So I don't really like to talk about how many followers I have, and I don't ever really bring that up in conversation because I know that I just paid for them.
Right.
But it does help my presence and credibility, because when you're reaching out to someone to make a connection, they're going to look all through your page before they decide if I want to talk to this guy or not. So I'm just setting myself up to get a response is my goal. So I've met a lot of...
This is not a recommendation to go out and buy yourself 100,000 followers just, to be able to peddle whatever.
It's not worth it unless you're doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, Tim is actually doing stuff.
Yeah, because I'm not just buying it to say I have followers. I'm buying it to increase my response rate so I can connect with people at scale.
Yeah. This is the first time I've heard this approach, that's why I'm so excited to do this freaking podcast. Like, you get to hear the different ways that people do stuff, because I've had entrepreneurs on, I've had people who have Airbnbs and all that kind of stuff. And it's funny how often things rhyme, but everyone has their own approach to what they do. So you can take little bits and pieces of each, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah.
So as far as going after, say, this connection you have or you want to go meet Gary Vee, what are the ways that you market yourself and make that connection?
The easiest way to meet people like that, like for example, I did meet Gary Vee. I bought a ticket to a conference he was speaking at, and then I saw him and I walked up to him and talked to him for a couple minutes and asked for a picture.
How much was that ticket? Do you remember?
The total trip probably cost me $2,000 because it was in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
But
you also were talking to me about someone that you met in Puerto Rico before we started recording. Did you meet them at that conference?
I did over 100,000 in sales off of people I met at that conference in Puerto Rico.
Y'all.
and I'm continuing to do more. Like it'll probably, yeah. I don't know what it'll go to just because that was almost a year ago now. People are re-signing up for our annual services and also getting a lot of referrals out of that. So I got a referral out of someone I met in Puerto Rico literally 2 days ago, and she just, paid $17,500 for some of our services.
Out of $2,000 of investment that is also a tax write-off at the same time.
That's it.
So I think that this episode is going to be the perfect, like, if you listen to the last few episodes and you're like, I don't know if I should invest in myself or not. This is like your sign, like invest in your freaking self.
Yeah. At first, I was definitely going to the conferences just to meet people and to learn. But at a certain point, you hear a lot of the same speakers, you hear a lot of the same stuff, and it is good material. But I go to conferences and make money now.
Was it scary to go into sales? So I've worked W-2 jobs the majority of my life. Like I worked at Chick-fil-A for 4.5 years. I've worked at I worked at all these different companies where my check relied on me going to the same place every day, clock in, clock out. What does your kind of work history look like? And was it scary to go into sales and make talking to people your business?
Yeah, I've never had like a consistent, stable income and even a W-2 until I'm on a partial W-2 as of like property management, where a lot of it was really commission on new leases that were signed, stuff like that. So I've never really had that cushion of W-2 consistent income. All I have to do is show up and get it. And I think that, I guess, has been good for me. Now, I didn't think I would ever do sales is the thing.
I didn't either. Just for the record, I never thought of myself as a salesman.
Yeah, so I didn't either, and I didn't know that I would ever get into it. But when I dropped out of college and I had a bit more free time, JD was like, well, you should try joining the business development and sales team at our company. I said, okay, well, I'll just do it. And I had a lot of different things going on. I was managing all of our properties. So at one point we had bought some more, and now I'm managing 93 properties. We were selling 48 of them. There were a lot of things going on, so I kind of stepped away from the sales. And then it was January last year. I was like, okay, I have big goals. I want to make more money. So I sat down with JD and talked about my goals for about an hour. He said, well, if you want to make that much money, you probably need to like sell some stuff. So I was like, okay, I'll just get back into it. So January, didn't really sell anything. I made $50 in commission.
Big money out here.
February, didn't really sell anything. And then February 28th, I sold $24,000.
And what were you selling?
Tax services.
Tax services.
Yeah,
okay.
mostly tax strategy for a year.
Okay.
Which is like very, very valuable. Like you're going to get a very good return on investment. So it was pretty easy. You just have to talk to people that it makes sense for. You have to make enough money that spending $20,000 is going to actually save you money on tax.
Right. So you didn't make anything for the first month plus, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So what were some of the thoughts that went through your mind like during that time? Did you want to quit?
No, I didn't want to quit, and I knew it was going to come, and I just had to build traction and build a pipeline. There's so much more to sales than I ever thought. I always thought You just talk to people who are kind of interested. You give them the information, and
they're just gonna run to you. Yeah.
And they'll either say yes or no, and they'll do it. But then it's like, no, there's a process to present, to just the whole phone call, to the greeting, to your presentation, and then objection handling. Like most objections are really just a complaint. Like they internally want to do it, but they just, you just put the guard up. Like, it's called sales resistance. So I didn't know any of that stuff. I've learned a lot and studied a lot of it and listened to a lot of books, a lot of podcasts, and I feel like I'm becoming good at it now.
Maybe.
Yeah, but yeah. So I was just sticking to it, and it wasn't my only source of income. So like I still owned the real estate company, and I was still also getting fees for property management and that kind of stuff. So I wasn't like gonna miss rent if I didn't sell something.
Sure.
But I was really motivated and had really big goals that required me to increase my income.
Nice. So with the property management company, there's so much to unpack here. I wish maybe we'll make this a 2-part episode because Tim has just got so much going on. With the property management company, you said you started that.
No, it was...
Or not out of high school, sorry. Dropped out of college.
No, actually, so we started the investment company when I was still in college.
Okay.
And I was just managing the properties we owned. So it wasn't a property management company. There's a lot more that goes into a property management company and a lot of requirements. And like someone on your team has to have a broker's license. But I was just managing properties we owned.
Okay.
I didn't manage for anybody else. But I was, of course, being compensated for it.
Cool. So you built up a form of income before you jumped kind of like the sink or swim kind of environment. Yeah,
it was pretty decent income, but I wanted to make a lot more to reach, to reach my big goals. And I wanted to start buying properties with my own money, which I did eventually end up doing. But once I really learned how it works and how the world works in relation to sales, I kind of fell in love with it and got obsessed with it. It's just like, I think every person who has entrepreneurial ambitions should get into sales at some point, because we all sell. You sell yourself to a company to give you this certain salary. Like you sell yourself to, someone that you want to be in a relationship with. You sell yourself to anybody, anytime. We're all in sales. So it's advantageous to get better at it because it's just part of life. But then when you realize like, you have a really good product and service that's going to really, really help people, and it, and you've seen it consistently, get good results for your clients. But some people just need a professional push to actually make the decision. And it's just because of how humans are wired mentally. And, if you really do have a good product and a good service and it's going to help the person, it's like almost your ethical obligation to make sure they do business with you.
Absolutely.
And it takes skill to do that.
And you have to truly believe in what you're selling too. I meet people all the time who are, they're in sales, but they don't. You can just tell. You can tell when someone's genuine about something and when they're not, especially when you're connecting and building that relationship. And I think it all circles back to the fact of like humanity. It's like we're all humans. No matter how much money we make, no matter where we live, what we do, we're all human. And you kind of have to tap into that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So I just recommend, like, whether you have a sales job by definition or not, to study how it works and just persuasion and sales and negotiation, just because it's going to help you no matter what. But I think I didn't finish my point. If you're one of those young people, or you don't even have to be young, that have entrepreneurial ambitions, you should get this skill because that is generating revenue. And if you know how to generate revenue, but then you're also good at the other stuff you're doing with your business, that's like the most important step, because you have to have that.
Right.
So like, I mean, literally my second month doing it, I generated $24,000 in revenue. That's a decent amount of money for a business.
Absolutely.
So like, if I can do that, and then I'm also like putting it together, building systems and processes or whatever, but I also know how to go bring in $24,000 into the bank account, that's a very valuable skill to have, like no matter what. Like if everything's going wrong, you can just go figure out how to get more money.
Right. Wow. So what are some of your favorite books and podcasts that you've read?
For real estate, getting into real estate, Bigger Pockets podcast, hands down. And I think it's probably the most popular in the world, real estate wise, but the most value. Just because at this point, everybody wants to be on it. Everybody with the really good information is on it, so there's good information on their podcast. I listen to Brad Lee's podcast every now and then because he does have really, really good guests come on there, and it's not 100% real estate focused, so I enjoy that. Books-wise, I listen to a lot of books, so I don't usually read them. I will on occasion, but I don't typically finish it if I'm reading a physical copy. I do collect books. I have a nice bookshelf full of books.
You buy the book that you've listened to so you can show that you've read it.
I do. Yeah. And I have a shelf for all the authors that I've met, which is really cool, and it's almost full. So that's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
But I listened to a lot of books last year. The first one was Atomic Habits, I remember. Really good book on just figuring out why it's important to control your habits, and then tips and techniques to build habits. Especially like in my mind, like the morning routine and the wins you want to get out of the way, like want to wake up on the time that you said you want to wake up, because that's a win. That's having control. Working out, exercising, like that's a win. I write down my goals every day, or I try to write my goals down every day, because it works like magic. When I started doing that, there's so many of them that I've already hit that I thought would take a year that really only took like a couple months. Something magic to writing your goals down. I encourage you to do that every day, if not twice a day. Just stuff like that, like building the habit.
So, like, let's just go to this morning. What goals did you write down?
I've got a bunch of them that I write down every time. The first one, which is my main goal for this year, which a lot of the other stuff will fall in line, or I'll have to do that to hit it. But my main goal for this year, which is a really big goal, is to earn $1 million. So I have some short-term goals, and then I have more long-term goals, and then I have goals that I want to do. I just want to become that person. Like I have the goal, I want to exercise daily. I want to beat the sun up daily. I want to create video content daily. I want to be a great husband daily. Like I have a bunch of things like that, and I also have the goal of so things like that. But then some of the other ones is I had a really big goal to help our team reach their goals and produce and start getting to the point where they can have the consistent sales, because it is hard. It was hard for me. And I had been working kind of inside the company for, I think, a year and a half before I joined the sales team. So I knew what we do. I knew the product. I knew how good we were, all that stuff. So it was a little bit easier for me. So I wanted to help the team just get to that point where then they're, producing consistent income. But we had a lot of interns on our teams. When school started, a lot of them kind of trickled off because it was getting a little too hard, because it really takes dedication. So we're rebuilding the team, but
my goal is 100,000. So
yeah, that's a good goal.
10x.
Yeah.
So what is your why? What would you say? Like what is that driver? What gets you out of bed before the sun every morning?
One thing I was going to say was that they're not all financial goals,
right?
But that is a big part of it, because that's a tool that you can use to reach all the other ones. Some of my other ones I write down every day is I want to travel often. I want to give as much as I can. Like I like to just give money and not worry about it. Like, oh, we're done.
Go earn it back.
Yeah, exactly. And having faith in my ability to go make more money helps me to be more generous and also to invest in myself more. So that's a big key. And having those skills is part of that. Like, I have faith in my ability to go make another $10,000, so I don't worry about investing $10,000 in a mastermind or something like that. That's going to get me to another level. Repeat the question, because I kind of went back to that.
You're good. Yeah, like your why. Like what gets you out of bed before the sun?
I struggle with this, and I'm actually going to an event that we are hosting called Onward 72, which is where it's a very small event. We only have 20 people go to it, and it's focusing 72 hours straight on yourself. Just being so young, it's like a lot of people, their easy answer is like, my kids. Yeah. I don't have any kids. I have a dog and a wife. and of course I care for them, and I love them and love my wife, but we're doing all right already. And I take care of her and I provide for her. But I think it's just the pursuit of my potential what I can do. And especially after experiencing a lot of things I've experienced and meeting the people, hearing their stories, I know I could just do so much.
Right.
Like one of the goals that I didn't mention is that with our investment group, we want to own 20,000 apartments.
20,000 like units, like doors?
Yeah, 20,000 units.
Okay. Someone who's in GoBundance, which is, a group of really like go-getter guys.
Yeah.
And I was having a conversation with him on a Facebook Messenger, and I was like, once you've seen what's possible, it's so hard to just expect less of yourself. Like, I'm seeing these guys who are doing all this stuff, and you realize they're all human. Like, they're all people, and they had to build it. It's not something where they just woke up overnight. And the commonality between most of the people that I see is that it wasn't handed to them.
Yeah. So I wish I had a better answer, but right now I just say it's the pursuit of my potential. And I'm sure there's a deeper meaning in there somewhere that I'm gonna hopefully figure out coming up here in a couple weeks when we go do that conference in Dallas. It's not quite a conference. It's more of like a mastermind development group. Yeah. So, but that's what it is. Just setting a higher standard for myself, because you can only do so much at a certain level, and I know it's possible to do more in all aspects of life, spiritually, financially, personally, professionally, relationally. There's and I try to, and I'm really good about having the abundance mindset instead of scarcity mindset. Like, there's just so much of all of those things, that you can always get better, and that pursuit, I think, is what helps me to keep going, because I just see the ability to be so much more productive in all of those ways, spiritually, financially, professionally, personally, everything relationally. So much more. Like, there's no way I'm a 10 out of 10, like not even close.
Right.
Even with all the growth I've experienced, all the work I've put in, not even close. And I just know not only my life, and it's great that my life will be better, but not only my life, but the life of the people around me will be better the closer I get to being a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you start surrounding yourself with more people and building a team. And that all goes back to connecting with people. Like, when you're hiring people, you need to be able to connect with them as well. It's a way of building your internal network. Yep. So, you can't get to the mountaintop without a bunch of people pushing you behind you, pushing you up. And as they're pushing you up, they're also climbing up the mountain themselves, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's good to even be part of the group of people pushing. Like, you're still going up either way.
Absolutely.
And that's one thing. Like, I've actually had some of my friends who are also entrepreneurs ask me, how long do I think I'll work on the sales team? And I'm like, I could see myself doing this always, because when someone asks you to get on a rocket ship, you don't ask which seat, you just say yes. Because I see what we're doing and where we're going, the trajectory we're on, the opportunity we have and the opportunity I have. And since it all does tie in, because I do own companies and they're all affiliated, like that's something I could do forever, because it does align with my goals. And it does very, very clearly. I can see very, very clearly the path within what I'm doing today to reach every one of my goals.
That's alignment. It's not easy to get there, especially when a lot of the people who are going to be listening to this aren't in necessarily the mindset that either of us are of, growing and chasing.
Hopefully if they get this far into the podcast, they do have the growth mindset.
If you're in 47 minutes and you've been listening to this and you're just nodding along the whole time, this is a sign.
Or if you haven't turned it off yet.
Yeah, this is a sign that
tired of me.
You're there. Like, you just need that push. And, there are so many ways that you can get that. It's not necessarily something that's quantifiable, and it's different for every person, but it goes back to those connections.
Yeah, it really does. And it's funny, like, yeah, it really does. And it's funny, like, I try to not sound like I think I know everything, because I know I'll be so much wiser 50 years from now, and I think I sound like an idiot at 22. But just with the with the experience and what I've learned, how I've invested myself, you've done pretty well.
I have to not limit myself, but sometimes I have to go back and remember that. Like, I'll be talking to 55-year-olds and I'll be like, why don't you do this? And it's like, they're 55 and they're like, I had somebody give me that feedback. It's like, dude, I've been around the world a few times, you know. I have to remember that.
It's tough because some of those people do have the complete wrong mindset, and you're right.
Yeah.
Which is like, because I think you and I are pretty similar. Like, we're pretty wise for our age, but we also don't want to think we know everything.
Yeah, I don't want to limit myself because, I mean, your mind is unlimited. It's only limited by what you think your limits are. Yeah. But at the same time, I don't want to come across to people as like me trying to lecture anybody or teach them how to live or anything like that.
Do you deal with imposter syndrome?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I felt imposter syndrome pretty bad and I didn't even want to like be a guest on people's podcasts until I bought a property 100% by myself, which is like kind of weird because 93 properties that I owned a part of, which is huge when you're like 20 years old or 21 years old.
It's huge no matter what age you're at.
No matter what, honestly.
Yeah, that's more than probably 99%.
But I didn't want to go on a podcast and talk like I knew anything until I bought something by myself.
It's almost a point of pride, you know, of saying, I can do this, you know, and walking the talk. I think that's important when you're looking to go and talk to people too. It's like, you can talk about stuff all day long, but you've got to walk the talk. Like, I sell virtual assistant services, and I was going to these business owners and telling them how good it is. And I was like, I don't even have one myself. I need to walk the talk. And as soon as I started walking the talk, that's when this podcast finally got off the ground and got going. And I started reaching out to all of these people when I started doing what I said I was doing or what I was trying to sell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's an important thing in selling is you will only sell to the degree you're sold. And if you're sold, you'll probably buy your products.
Yeah.
So I pay probably a lot more than I should for our company to file my taxes. I paid $5,000 to go to this conference I'm going to because I also am selling other people the tickets. And how am I going to convince you to spend $5,000 to focus on yourself if I wouldn't spend $5,000 to focus on myself? So you could say, well, I would, but I don't have to say that. Like, I bought a ticket. I'm going to be there. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing in sales. It's like, if you want to sell more, you should buy what you're selling.
Yeah. And it's funny, this is always a reoccurring theme with all the guests I've interviewed, but you don't have to know your why. You just have to show up. Like, showing up is the most important part. Whether you're a salesperson, whether you literally just want to read books for a living, I don't care what you want to do. That's what the whole audience is.
Just do it.
Just show up to what you know will grow yourself. And you can know that by asking the people who are where you want to be.
Yeah.
And then,
And even if you don't figure out your why, life will get better.
Yeah.
At the very least, hopefully. Or you'll be able to deal with the tougher situations at the very least.
Have you ever struggled with like depression or anxiety or anything like that?
Not really, honestly.
Okay. A lot of people that I know do. And I heard something the other day that was really fascinating to me, and I don't want to sit here and say that I have. I mean, I've been depressed and I've been anxious before. I don't think that I necessarily have like a chronic kind of thing.
like for moments at a time.
Yeah. But I think that a lot of the reason why I haven't experienced a lot of that, and I may be wrong, I'm not a doctor. I don't know literally anything that I'm talking about, but I've never limited myself, and I've just consistently connected with people. And I think that that's a real part of keeping that kind of stuff away, because I know when I lay in my bed all day long, like by myself, I start to get depressed and lonely, especially like as a single person. So if you're introverted, it's you're like, oh, you don't know how terrifying it is to go and talk to people, like, because I'm an extrovert, and I don't understand that, but I do know that just being around people who are going to help build you up, that I think has kept me out of a lot of dark holes that I could have fallen down.
Yeah, and helps you build your confidence. And I'm trying to think of the exact words how he said it, but Alex Hormozi said the easiest way to build confidence is not to look at yourself in the mirror and shout affirmations, but it's to consistently prove to yourself that you are who you say you are. And if you consistently are doing that, it's very easy to trust yourself and be confident in whatever you're doing. It's because you are consistently showing yourself that, hey, I do this. Like, this is who I am.
Tim always gives me so many. I'll tell him about these things I'm doing. He's like, "Are you limiting yourself? Is that what I hear? You're limiting yourself?
You're only talking to people in Chattanooga for your business that is online.
Mm-hmm.
There are over 300 million people in this country. And there's like maybe 100,000 in Chattanooga.
Right.
And how many of them are business owners? How many of them could buy from you?
Not that many. Yeah.
So I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Social media.
Absolutely. So Tim, speaking of social media, where can the people find you? Where can they follow you and keep up with your awesome journey that you're doing, and even maybe ask you some questions if they resonated with anything?
Instagram's the easiest way. So my Instagram is at I am Tim Stone, the letters I am. And I'm also on YouTube. I have a podcast as well. So it's the same. Look up Tim Stone, or you could look up I'm Tim Stone on YouTube. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a Twitter account. I don't use it much, but I should.
I don't even have Twitter, so it's okay.
Yeah, I don't really use it. Also on TikTok, where I post a lot of the videos, but I'm not super active on there. But Instagram, if you want to get in touch with me, is the best way.
Okay, cool. And as far as business-wise, like, is there anything you want people to know about your business? Is there any way that if someone listened to this and they want to do some business with you, what would they do there?
If you are a business owner, there's a good chance we could save you some money on tax. So book a call with me and let's see if that's true.
Sure.
Also, I do a lot of real estate deals. We're buying a lot of real estate and we need millions and millions of dollars to do so. So if you are qualified and have some liquid cash, we can have a conversation, see if it makes sense to put it somewhere.
Awesome, Tim. Well, this has been, I think, just a wonderful episode. I think
it was a lot of fun.
But this is true value here. And if you just follow what Tim talked about and don't follow me, you're going to get lost. I'm bringing all these smart people on because, they're where I want to be. So follow Tim's advice, go invest in yourself, and you won't regret it.
Well, that's what all my advice too is. I just bring on people smarter than me and just say the things they said.
That's exactly what I do. Well, you heard it here first, guys. Just listen to smart people and repeat what they say. This has been Hayden Fike and Tim Stone. Thank you guys so much for listening. Have a good day.